Hello, Tom Morgan here. Welcome back to another weekly update about everything that's happening in the Skype for Business, the teams, the AI, the cognitive services development world. So some of this information coming at you as a developer in this space, and some interesting things to talk about this week. So following on from last week, so last week I talked about the Microsoft Healthcare bot, and so this week we have a part 2 blog post about that, which is all about installing it and getting it running in your tenant. So if you heard last week about the healthcare bot and you thought, oh, that sounds interesting, that sounds like something I'm interested in, it might be useful to me, or it might be useful to my customers, or I should look into that. Well, here's an opportunity. This blog post goes into how you can get it installed and running on your own tenant, and it's surprisingly easy to get up and running with some built-in scenarios as well. You don't need to kind of do a bunch of work just to get something up and running. It might not be right for the kind of the medical application you want to use it for, but if you first of all just want to get it up and running and kick the tires on it, then it's surprisingly easy to do. I am going to do a couple more parts of new blog posts in this kind of mini series I'm doing, because there's a couple of things that aren't immediately obvious. There's some configuration stuff. There's a whole built-in workflow editor that you'll see if you go through the installation steps. So I want to go into a little bit more detail about that and how that works. And then also, it's not immediately obvious how you go from the healthcare bot that's there at the moment that you install in your own tenant. It's not immediately obvious how you go from that to having it running on your own website. So I want to kind of cover that in a blog post as well. So kind of at least 2 more blogs coming about the healthcare bot at some point. So if you're interested in that, look out for those. Obviously you can subscribe and you'll find them. They'll arrive in your inbox if you do that. There's RSS as well, or you can just kind of keep an eye on my Twitter, and I'll probably mention them in these weekly updates as well, to be honest. All right, so that happened. Also kind of happening this week. So this was good. So for a long time, I've said as well, Teams is relatively new. It's relatively new and exciting in this space, and it's really been Microsoft's answer to really Slack. Slack is the kind of ease of use, collaboration, the kind of text-based just works, and Slack is really popular amongst developers. It's in that developer space. It's a startup mentality. It's easy to use. It's cheap. I think it's free to start with, and then even there are enterprise plans and stuff, but plenty of people I think still use free Slack. It's hard to get by as a developer and not come across Slack. Your organization might not use it, but your community might use it, your friends might use it. So Slack is pretty ubiquitous, and it's been a challenge for Microsoft in this space, and they've been they've really been looking to disrupt what Slack does, and you can tell that real rivalry is there. You can tell they're competing products. I remember when Teams first GA'd, I think it was, Slack took out a full-page ad in the New York Times, I want to say. I think that's right, you can go and look it up, which was kind of interesting. It was kind of a bold kind of marketing move, I guess. And it's interesting to come to this point. So why am I telling you this? Well, Spiceworks, if you've done any kind of infrastructure management, any kind of IT admining, you'll have heard of Spiceworks. They did a survey recently looking at who uses collaborative chat apps and how they're being adopted by businesses. The kind of key takeaway, the interesting takeaway here, is that Teams has now become the most used collaborative chat app in business adoption, and what that means is it's overtaken Slack is really what we're saying here. So in the last 2 years, from 2016 to 2018, so Slack has gone from 13% of the market to 15% of the market in terms of take up of businesses. So that's kind of, I guess, what you'd expect for something that's been around a while. Teams has gone from 3% of the market to 21% of the market. So it's gone from nothing. It's gone from that standing start, when it GA'd, up to overtaking Slack in terms of collaborative chat apps. And it's overtaken Hangouts, which is 11%, Facebook Workplace is 1%. The only other kind of real place in the competition, interestingly, is Skype for Business, which is still double Teams at 44%. Now, obviously, we're going to see that change because Microsoft's efforts are in promoting Teams as that number one experience for meetings and collaboration. So I expect to see those Skype for Business numbers to go down, but then those Teams numbers will go up and up and up. And if Slack stays roughly where it is, then you're going to have Slack at 15% and you're going to have Teams at something like 60%, and it's going to be much more obvious. And so that's interesting. What's interesting for me as well, anyway, is that those numbers are true. Those numbers about Teams outweighing Slack are true across companies. It's not just big businesses. So there's some charts in the blog post I've done, but I thought that was really interesting, is that even among small businesses and medium-sized businesses, it's not like Teams is only a thing for big businesses. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I go in the blog post, I go into why I think that might be, and some other stuff. There's loads of really good data actually in this survey. So I definitely recommend you either go and look at the whole survey or just look at my blog post where I pulled out the bits I think are interesting and why I think they're interesting. And it covers features and it also covers future deployment plans as well. So it's not specifically aimed at developers, which would be an interesting survey because I think developers use these chat apps differently, or at least they use them in two ways. They use them in the way that everybody else uses them, which is to get stuff done, to talk to their peers, as a collaborative chat app. But then it's also using those things as a dev platform, a platform to run your apps on. And it would be interesting to see a survey about Slack and Teams as a app platform, because Slack is a huge app platform. It's a really popular dev app platform. But Teams is also an app platform, and it is one that is growing leaps and bounds as the months roll on. And it's something Microsoft care really deeply about. It is making it a really good dev platform. So watch this space on that. I think that will be really interesting. And then two other things I want to briefly talk to you about that happened in the week. More integrations with Flow and Teams. That's good. So you can, if you do stuff in Flow, there's more you can do in Flow with Teams now. There's triggers. You can post things into channels, and you can also have Flow triggers for Teams. So when stuff gets put into Teams, you can execute flows. So that is super interesting. And also, as we're kind of coming to the end of the year, it's wrapping up a little bit. It's time for people to start writing their, let's look at 2018. Let's look at the good bits and the bad bits, and then look forward into 2019. One of those has been published that I think you should read by Mary Jo Foley. And it's kind of interesting because it touches on a lot of the kind of softer side of Microsoft that I've talked about certainly this year, about a company for good, and it really kind of focuses in on how they've changed their approach and some of the things that we've seen on the ground. That they've changed how they sell, and they've changed how they comp their sales guys on how they sell, and it's much more based on usage now rather than on just units sold. And that's had a fundamental change because it drives people to push the usage of of all this stuff rather than just kind of sell it and walk away. So I thought it's an interesting read. It's worth reading. It's not very long really, it's a good one. So that's everything I wanted to talk about this week. I hope you have a great week. I hope you are suitably ready for the festive season, unlike me. And yes, so have a good weekend and what's left of it. And have a great week next week. And I will speak to you again next time.